I was at Fordham University talking to a graduating class of folks that were in a leadership development class. And one of the students raised her hands and said to me, I read your book and I read a lot about what you're talking about. And in theme with today's conversation, as well as our last podcast, what's the line between
Yeah.
familial and corporate
Yeah.
relationships?
Yeah.
And my answer at the time, and I know we're going to summarize today's conversation to help answer that question, but I also
Yeah.
would say at the time, I actually don't create a line that is one anyone else should create. I'll take it
Mhm.
as far as I want to take it. You take it as far as you're comfortable taking it. And I would say that I've got coworkers that I worked for that worked for me that are also known as aunt and uncle to my children. Welcome to How You Go There, a podcast that goes beyond traditional success stories to uncover the real strategies, skills, and turning points behind people who make things happen. Hosted by Scott Montgomery, author of How Did You Get Here? Lessons of Unconventional Success, business owner and ICF certified leadership coach, alongside Linda Misegadis, a seasoned expert in business strategy, leadership development, and career transformation. Together, they bring sharp insights, real-world experience, and powerful storytelling to every episode. Listeners hear authentic conversations with professionals, leaders, and changemakers who've navigated big pivots, career breakthroughs, setbacks, and new opportunities. Subscribe now and join the next evolution of the journey, because this is how you go there. Hey, Linda, welcome to the
Hey.
podcast.
Yes, it's so good to see you, my friend. How are you?
It's good to see you too. How'd you get here
Yeah.
today?
Well, I was late, I gotta admit it. So I'll take my accountability around that I was running behind today. I was busy this week traveling for we were
Good.
out doing some leadership meetings and all of that together. So it's always nice to kind of get together, with
Uh-huh.
everyone.
Uh-huh.
But then it does, you get back in the office and you're like, trying to catch up on things, and so it definitely got me running a little behind today. So
Oh, no, I was teasing you I was teasing you before we jumped on here live that you were late and you owed a big apology, but you don't at all. I was late too, Hey, we're organic. We're a half hour late to our original start time today,
yeah,
but
well, you know what? That's all right, right? That's a good
it's
thing
been a
about
good
being
week.
fluid. Has it been a good week?
It
Good.
has been a fantastic week, and it sounds like for you too with the travel and
It
the new
has, yeah.
microphone you're going to use for our next podcast
I
arrived.
do. I have a new
Uh-huh.
some new equipment. We're just going to get better and better all the time, right? I mean,
I
that's
love
what
it.
makes this so much fun. So
So much fun. Well, last week we talked a little bit about that first job, right? So we're trying to stage for our listeners, what it's like to be going from college, sharpening your leadership and your management skills and your own personal self-care and all the chapters of my book and all
yeah,
the things we've learned in our careers. And we're honing in on this last week around that first job and, what do you do
yeah,
and how does that work? And so I think there's enough there that we wanted to have yet another conversation around some of the
absolutely.
context on that topic, and acknowledging that the first job is often more about learning how to work and how to
Yeah.
connect than actually
Yes.
staying in that job forever,
That's true. That's true. I
tying
mean,
us to
'cause
relationships and
clearly
all. Yeah.
neither you nor I are in our first job that we started out with. It was the foundation, and it's a rare bird that you see finds one job and stays there forever, I think. So,
Fun fact about my first job is that one of the first managers I had in my first job actually works for WorldGate today and is in charge of all the training and development of my entire staff.
well, that just kind of speaks to what we've talked about in the past, right? The power of relationship and network and
Yes.
how things
Hmm.
come full circle, and why it's so important. And we're going to talk about this today is to make the most of those relationships because as you and I were chatting, I shared with you as we've been doing this and doing a little self-reflection, I started mapping out my own journey and realizing how much of it was the person I knew here who then took me there, who then moved to
Yes.
here. And then like I've moved throughout my career in doing that and have returned that same favor, right? So there were lots of
Totally.
people, especially early on in my life, that I when I moved a job, as soon as I had an opening for that person, boom, I was like, "Hey,
Yes.
let's get you over here," because I think it's part of the whole circle of life, right? So
I no, I agree, and I think it's one of the things that makes what we do in our careers and how we make money fulfilling. And
I
it,
agree.
it takes it out of task and things that will expire. We laughed earlier in our last episode about how I was selling business supplies, ribbons, and typewriters, and
Yeah.
those aren't things that are in any language today around
No.
technology.
Yeah.
And yet, the people that I did it with are
Yeah.
working in my organization today, right? So, really
Yeah.
emphasizing for our listeners and for our participants that your first job is a training ground on how to connect with people. And
Yeah.
if you can do that well and you can master what it is your task is to complete, whether it's selling
Mhm.
ribbons or
Yep.
laptops, that will give you even more recognition, in the
Yes.
world of who you want to connect with for future reference, for
I
future
totally
job,
agree.
and for your next step. Yeah.
No, it's so true. Well, so let's dig into that a little bit because, I we always hear, we tell and we say it too, build your network,
Hmm.
establish relationships, but how do you
Hmm.
do that, right? Because it sounds great, but how do I actually do that? I'm young, I just started, like how do I build
Yeah.
those relationships? So, can we talk about that?
I We can, and I will say I absolutely did it as you just described. So, one of the things I was aware of is the opportunity I was given in my young age for the job that I
Uh-huh.
had, right? So, someone is always, you will interview, you will find that right fit, you will see it in the eyes of the people you work with. But then what I did to honor that was I dressed the part, I
Yeah.
showed up 10 minutes early, I made eye contact. I tried to be proactive. I
Mhm.
listened and I went
Yep.
through the functions of being a good participant, not a good delivery person. And those two
Yeah.
things were very different. And I never actually went to the offices of the executives unless my shirt was tucked in, unless I didn't have hat head and my hair was combed. And I went in ready to have that interaction. I didn't just run in and have the interaction and look like I was falling apart. So
Well,
there's a
and
lot of
let's
components to that.
there is, and
Yeah.
I want to dig in a little bit because one of the things you talked about was okay, so looking the part, right? So I want to go
Hmm.
in, I want to make sure. But one of the things that I also think that we often forget about that is so important is when you're going in, it's not that the executive or the leader that you're going to have this conversation with, or whoever it is more
Yeah.
important than you are, right? But
No.
they are busy and they have a
Hmm.
lot on their plate. So if they're making the
Yes.
time to have the conversation, right? And you
Hmm.
want to make not just the good first impression, which is the visual, because that's what they see first, right? So absolutely you've got that side of it. But then when you take it to the next level, what are some key things when you're going to go in? So I'm betting that you didn't just go into those offices, make sure you look good, and then say, "Hey, so what's going on? How are you? How did you get here?" That was not your conversation, right? I'm sure that you went in with a more scripted kind of thought process of what you wanted to ask and why you wanted to ask it.
Hey everyone, Scott Montgomery here from the How You Go There podcast, and we've got something special for you. We're on a mission to hit 100 subscribers on our YouTube channel, and we want to celebrate by giving back to our amazing community of young leaders and future executives. So here's the deal. We're doing a giveaway. All you need to do to enter is 1. Like this video, 2. Subscribe to the channel, and 3. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite episode of How You Go There. Once we hit 100 subscribers, we'll randomly pick a winner. And that person will get a signed copy of How Did You Get Here? Lessons of Unconventional Success, and the How You Go There Companion Guide. These books are packed with real-world insight for anyone looking to grow in leadership, pursue executive coaching, or just take the next steps in your journey. So if you're serious about leadership growth and learning from people who have done it their own way, now's your chance. To learn more, head on over to howyougothere.com. So, yes, I was selective in who I chose to show up. I was also considering their receptiveness to it. There are leaders that are closed off. There are people that will make it difficult. There is also not a once and done scenario.
Yeah.
So I literally describe in my book, and I don't know if I've mentioned that I wrote a book about all this.
Did you write a
Um,
book? Because I mean, I have
yeah,
this
there's a story.
companion guide too,
There's a story.
that you might have done, so
There's a story, and I love doing my own press on that. But there is a story in there that is actually true. And I went to the office of one of the executives when I worked at Verizon. Frequently, I would stop in and say, "Hey, is he here? I just want to say hi. How's it going? What's your day look like?"
yeah,
I did it on a day I was prepared. I did it on a day that I had the time, and I did it on a day that I knew they were in the office and that maybe things looked quiet in the organization. The
yeah,
receptionist was like, "He's not in there right now, so come back later." And I made nice with the receptionist, who then
yeah,
sent me a quick hit and said, "Hey, he's in the office if you want to pop over today, or he'll be in the office tomorrow."
yeah,
And what I said was, I'd like to just bend his ear and ask for advice. You can never
okay,
fail in asking for advice.
yeah,
You're more senior. So I've actually had that happen to me too, where someone on LinkedIn actually showed up in my office door, sat down and said, "Hey, I'm new to the industry of
mhm,
corporate, and I wonder
yeah,
what your take would be. And I have some questions around leadership development, like I did my executives." And the next thing you know, you're involved in projects, you're starting to get to know each other, and there are
right,
friendships that start to evolve
yeah,
that are
no, I like that.
work based. Yeah.
Well, and I think if you take it another step too, in thinking about the environment that we are in today, is that most of the time, I'd recommend go out on LinkedIn and read that person's profile. So learn a little bit about that person. So when you have the
Hmm.
conversation, like a great example, I'm not an Indiana Pacers fan, but my boss is a huge Indiana Pacers fan, and they are in
Hmm.
the NBA Finals right now. Well, I checked out the game last night to see what was in, and when we were talking on our call this morning, the first thing I did is said, "Hey, I saw your Pacers pulled off a last second win. Halliburton shoots a shot, and they beat the Thunder."
Buzzer beater.
What a
Yeah.
great icebreaker! Oh my gosh, yeah, and he's so excited about it, right? And so we were able to share in a moment to have that conversation, but
Absolutely.
I have to know that about him to do it. So take the time, go and learn a little bit about that person so you can create that personalization in it. And then also to your point, come with an agenda in mind. Don't come just completely open-ended, like even in the situation that you described there, I'm sure like that person, and I hope they did, and if they didn't, maybe they'll listen to the podcast and learn something
Hmm.
today. But the person who came to you, I hope that they already had some questions, right? To say, okay, listen,
Yeah.
I'm new to
Totally.
corporate, and these are a
Yeah.
couple things that I'd love to, because again, your time is valuable, not that theirs isn't as well, but if you're going to make the time to have the conversation, make sure there's something out of it, right? Because it's not just enough to show up. You got to also bring something in that's going to create a connection that's going to then build that relationship potentially for the future.
Exactly. And it's sometimes hard to know if someone's a Pacers fan or an Eagles fan or whatever, but you're in the office and you're doing work on the team, and you can start
Yeah.
with that work-based sort of header as well. If
Yeah.
they're not sharing some of that personal stuff, that will come, and don't rush it. You're not
Don't
going
rush
in
it.
once.
Agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone,
No.
I've always heard and I've always appreciated from my employees, give me a year. And in that
Yeah.
year, your job is to forge relationships and get to know people. It's not transactional.
Right.
And it's also not the executive suite. It's also your peer group.
Well, and I think that's an important point too, right? It's not
Mhm,
just
mhm,
about making relationships at the top, because one of the other things you said there is you developed a relationship with that
mhm,
executive's admin or chief of staff or
mhm,
executive assistant, who
mhm.
then now she or he views you as, oh, all right, I like this Scott guy, so I'm
Right.
going to let him know the next time, Joe's available. And I might even put in a positive word for you too, right? I might say something, hey, you know what, you might want to have this conversation, or I'll find time on his calendar or her calendar because I like you. So I'm going to give you that extra opportunity. So,
With over a decade of experience, WorldGate LLC is your trusted partner in IT staffing, project management, and UKG solutions tailored for the public sector. We help government agencies and organizations navigate complex technology landscapes, implement effective workforce solutions, and build high-performing teams. From strategic staffing to seamless systems integrations, we bring the experience and reliability to execute, empower, and exceed for our customers. Staffing? Check. Project management? Check. Public sector and UKG solutions? Check. Experience you can trust. Visit www.worldgatellc.com today. So there's two things that come up for me when you say that about the follow-up piece and about how to get them to like you, right? So be vulnerable,
Yeah,
be vulnerable and also appreciative of
right.
their time just looking at the calendar. So if you do end up with an admin gatekeeper or a chief of staff gatekeeper, you can also work that relationship and you can
Yeah,
thank them for said meeting with a cup of coffee a week later. I didn't forget you.
absolutely.
Here's a cup of
Yes.
coffee. I
Yeah.
didn't forget you. Here's a sticker. I didn't forget you. Here are some breath mints, which is another story in the book that one of my coachees actually applied to his boss, who now works for him. And so
Right.
it's an interesting dance of opportunity that comes from the follow up, whether it's the chief of staff or
Absolutely.
the executive or your peer. And it
Absolutely.
and that creates not only the vulnerability, but the authenticity of that quest. Because again, it's
Right.
your first job. It's about getting to know the people, not the tasks. I
Yes.
totally wholeheartedly believe that's a 75-25 split, if not 80-20.
I agree with you. And I like what you said there too, because, one of the other things that we talk about is, take on those cross functional projects, right? So
Mhm,
get
mhm.
involved in other things that provide you with the opportunity to make those relationships and don't get hung up on titles because oftentimes we get too hung up on, oh, well, that person's a manager, a director, a senior director, a VP, a C suite, whatever, and sometimes you might miss that the most influential person is the person without a title. And
Mhm.
so don't make assumptions that title equals whatever it is you've created in your mind, right? And that's why
Totally.
it's so important to really understand and to develop those relationships across the board because you never know when that person without the title might be the most influential person to help you with what you need in the future.
And the best way to recognize them is through the gratitude of their support and lifting them. And the way you can do
Absolutely.
that also comes from don't watch the clock. You're not an 8 to
Yes.
5er in the real world. I don't care what anyone says. If your shift is 8 to 5, you're there from 7:45 to 5:30 maybe.
Yep.
And in that extra time, you're actually lifting and helping people. You're rolling up your sleeves, you're volunteering, you're staying engaged in the work of
Yeah.
the relationship, doing the tasks of the business.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. Well, one of the other things I'm curious about is I heard this from another colleague who had brought this up, and I loved the idea. So, is around like remembering names and saying thank you, but also
Yes.
little things, right? Like, so what one of the things that they described was when they know, they find out, like, I know that your kids' names, or I know when your
Mhm,
birthday is, or I know
mhm,
your anniversary, or something like that. And what
mhm.
they did is they just jotted that next to the contact, or in this case,
Hmm,
put it in your phone, and put the
sure.
contact in there, and then put the birthday or something that's important. So then when they're having a conversation with that person, they'll say, so hey, how's Caitlin? How's she
Yes.
doing? And that also it brings the defenses down too, right? It's
Mhm,
disarming
mhm.
to someone because you've made it personal and you've
Right.
remembered my name, you remembered my spouse's name, you remember my dog's name, whatever it is, but it's something and it's disarming and it opens the door to communication as well.
100%. And I was at Fordham University talking to a graduating class of folks that were in a leadership development class, and one of the students raised her hands and said to me, I read your book and I read a lot about what you're talking about, and in theme with today's conversation as well as our last podcast, what's the line between
Yeah.
familial and corporate
Yeah.
relationships?
Yeah.
And my answer at the time, and I know we're going to summarize today's conversation to help answer that question, but I also
Yeah.
would say at the time, I actually don't create a line that is one anyone else should create. I'll take it as
Mhm.
far as I want to take it. You take it as far as you're comfortable taking it. And I would say that I've got coworkers that I worked for that worked for me that are also known as aunt and uncle to my children.
Right.
So that is a select few. probably more than most because my line doesn't exist
Yeah.
typically. As
Yeah.
long as the demographic works and you can, forge those stronger relationships, I'm open to taking them as far as they'll go. And when you start to get into that inner
Yes.
circle, I've had a key to several of my boss's houses. And
Yes. Yeah.
that meant I could rummage through their shit if I wanted to when they were out of town. And of course I didn't.
Absolutely.
You know what I
Right,
mean?
yes, no,
Right.
100%. So I had a similar situation back, in the day, and, I was working for a company, and the CEO, one of the co-owners of the company, like, I nannied for his kids when him and his wife traveled out of the country. I would go down,
Wonderful.
I'd stay at their house, and take
Sure.
care of it. I was younger then, so but, you may not do that today, but that was, something you did then. And it similarly, it forged a relationship. That man and his wife would do anything to help me and did. They helped
Yeah.
me many, many times along the
Great.
way,
It's wonderful.
in developing those relationships. So I totally agree with that. I
I've
think
never
it's
heard that
important.
story from you, so I think we're getting into it today a little bit, which is nice. I've never heard that story, and also to the student at Fordham who was graduating, maybe that's what's gonna happen in your storyline. I can't
Yeah,
prescribe where your line is, but
right.
I would suggest to all people, it's never what you know, it's always who you know. Thanks for listening to How You Go There podcast. If this sparks something for you, share it, review it, or connect with us at howyougothere.com. Keep leading, and we'll see you next time.